Welcome everyone to episode 345 of Fergo and the Freak. I almost forgot what number it was. I am your host, the Glorious League Freak, and today we have our good friend from One-Eyed Eel and Rugby League Monthly joining us, Elliot Richardson. How are you, Elliot?
Good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Pretty good. Now, I said that we would get you back on a couple of weeks ago if the Eels got through, because it was going to make it a really interesting second round of the finals for the Eels. And it just so happens that they're going to take on the Penrith Panthers, which makes this game absolutely amazing. And I think it basically is everything that we were talking about 2 weeks ago. There's so many different dynamics for this game, and I had to have you back on to talk about it. So first of all, let's talk about how they played in week one against the Knights, because it was interesting. I thought that the Knights played very well. I thought that they played above themselves, and I was really worried about the Eels for a lot of the game, but they ended up getting the points. What did you think of that performance?
Nothing makes me more nervous than the Eels with a 12-point lead in the second half, which is exactly what they ended up at.
Mm-hmm.
Newcastle really gave us a good game. I was nervous coming into the game, and as my wife would attest to, very nervous throughout the game. To one point, I was basically pacing around the family room during the last 10 minutes or so. And my son was there, and he was a little bit concerned about Dad. Dad was talking a lot. And then at one point he was telling me, he was like commentating for me. He's like, "Dad, they bump. They get up and they're okay." I'm like, "Yes, mate." He's like trying to tell me that they're getting tackled and they're getting back up. But yeah, Newcastle were very tough. They obviously, we started horrendously with that kick out in the full and then conceding the first try. The following 20 minutes though was probably the best I've seen Parramatta defend kind of outside those Melbourne games. It's the physicality of it was immense. Regan Campbell-Gillard, Ray Stone, Junior Paulo, Murata Nukore, Nathan Brown, even Sean Lane, the middle forwards and the edge forwards really got into them. I wrote a comment on One-Eyed Eel saying it reminded me of I was a bit young to watch this, but I've seen plenty of the highlights. The 1998 final against the North Sydney Bears.
Oh, I love that game.
And Dean Pay goes berserk for about 5 minutes, and my dad's told me about this a million times.
Yes,
he just goes nuts, and he just throws himself at every single Bears forward, and they make about 25 meters in a set, and it's like the game's done then. Like the game's close, but mentally the Bears are shot, and at one point it looked like that. We pinned them, I think, a couple of times inside their own 30 and at one point inside their own 20, and Pearce was just like barely kicking the ball to halfway.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was what I wanted to see out of the side. And I was nervous mainly because Joey Lussick wasn't there, and I figured, we haven't shown great ability without Joey or Reedy, even though we've barely been without them at all this year. But without a recognised dummy half, I thought we were in a lot of trouble. But Ray Stone probably played his best game of his career, even considering he plays in the back row and plays at lock for us. An unnatural position for him at dummy half, but his service was really good. It was probably NRL level for dummy half. We didn't get as much width, which actually I think helped us. Sometimes we can be too sideways and we rely too much on that dummy half pass that zings about 15 metres to Mitch at first receiver. But I felt we adapted and Stoney played nice and short, and then he allowed Nathan Brown and Junior Paulo to play that middle role, that middle distribution role, which in turn got Mitchell Moses a little bit wider, attacking that third or fourth defender in where his speed is so effective. We saw that with his try. He took on I think it's the fourth defender in, just beating for pace. And that was, again, Mitch is at his best when he runs and he runs early. Like you see Mitch run early and you're like, Mitch is on today, right? He's good to go. And then his kicking game just builds off that. And it looks like he has more time. When Mitch has time, teams are in trouble.
Yeah. And like that, I was really worried with Ray Stone at hooker as well, because I feel as though you've really missed something around the hooker role for the last probably half of the season. But he did. He played really well. And look, this Eels team is best when it's playing north-south, and they're not worried about going east-west all the time. And they get stuck in that mode of, they want to spread it out wide, and they haven't earned the right yet. And when they do that, they're pretty easy to shut down. And that's where you see their defense. And I think that a lot of NRL sides work that out. You try and shut them down early up front, and they'll just start going side to side, and you've got them then. But yeah, when I saw Mitch Moses take on the line, it was like, ooh, because that's what you need to win in this final series. If he isn't running the ball, nothing else matters for the Eels. But if he is doing that and he's running the ball, then they become a really big problem, because then everything comes off the back of his dangerous running game. Everyone's worried about him running the ball, and they've got to deal with Dylan Brown and players like that after that. But I found it was a really interesting game because, they were great in the middle of the field, but Newcastle was finding a few ways through them, especially out wide. And, I think that there were times when there was definitely that sense of panic in the side, like, oh man, this could go really bad really quickly, especially when you kick the ball off on the full.
Yeah. Doesn't help. I think the conditions did have a say in that. It was quite hot out there, and both sides looked shot at several points during that game. Like the middle kind of disintegrated a little bit the longer the game went. Then obviously the edges start to look more frayed. They picked at Parramatta's right edge, which pretty much every side does. It's our poorest defensive edge, and I'd really like Blake Ferguson to stop his imitation of Eric Grothe Jr. A couple times at not their first try, that was Mitch defending on the wing, and he's not a winger. But one of their tries, and Fergo's like 3 or 4 meters infield from his winger, and he had no reason to be. I get Pong as a good player, but Fergo was in no man's land. He was halfway between the center and the winger. And he's like, well, you're not shutting anyone down there. And you didn't read the pass well enough to pick it off. So, I thought Newcastle kind of made the best of their opportunities. But obviously, I really think that middle period in the game where Parramatta turned the screws kind of took Newcastle's energy out of them, even though they staged that comeback. It was kind of like they fought so hard to get back into the game, and they never really got in there. It was 22-20. They never got ahead. So Newcastle they remind me of Parramatta from a few years ago. They're such a team that relies on confidence that even if they're behind by 2, they're worried. And it looked like that, kind of like you'd expect Mitchell Pearce to be a little more, a little better with his kicking game. But there were so many bombs down to Clint Gutherson. He was safe under the high balls, so he was having catching practice at some points. But I also think Parramatta just took the guts out of Newcastle's start to their sets. They really targeted the back 5, and that then impacted Newcastle's ability to get up the field. The other interesting thing from the game was a lot of people were concerned with Ryan Madison being left out. I wasn't too surprised. I've kind of learned not to get too worried about the team selection, to be quite honest with you, because I can't change that. And there's no point getting angry about a player getting left out. But I really liked having Murata start the game. In all honesty, if Isaiah Papali'i wasn't in the team, Murata would be up there for the Ken Thornett medal this season, and he's likely he might be up there for players player or coaches player. But he's played centre, he's played back row, he's played prop, he's come off the bench, played at lock. He's played everywhere for us, and we've actually looked. So I looked at the stats coming into the game. He'd played 11 games for us this season. We'd won 10 of them, and I think he's such a direct and hard runner of the ball on the edge that he demands attention from 2 defenders every time.
Yeah,
which gives space to his outside guys, and the guy outside is Will Penasini now, and not Wonga Blake. And Will Penasini, I'm going to do my best not to compare him, but I kind of like to see some similarities between players. Yeah. And I know a lot of people have compared him to Michael Jennings. He's got a very similar Jennings build, right? He's low to the ground. He's got big legs. He's strong. But I actually see a little bit of Jamie Lyon in him, in the footwork that he put on Inari Tawala. He had that in and away, the swerve, and then the big fend. And Lyon, until he dumped us and went to England, then to Manly, was my favourite player growing up. And then it was not only that, but it was then the flick pass. Jennings didn't really pass the ball.
No, he was a finisher.
Even at the end of his kind of time with us, he did pass to, I mean, when you got Maker Sivo outside you or Semi Radradra, but his first instinct was always to take the player on. Whereas I see Penasini's all about how can I beat my guy but set up my outside man.
Yeah.
And he did that to Newcastle. And he was so dangerous that they, later in the game, they numbered up on him and left Blake Ferguson with 15 metres of space on the outside.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's again, Penasini's a powerful runner of the ball. He's very hard to stop one-on-one. And Newcastle they bunched up in field and they picked the wrong guy. And so I really like that combination of Nicore on the inside of Penasini or on the inside, I think, of Moses, I think, defense on the right edge. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's interesting you bring up Michael Jennings, because I think that he was a really underrated loss. And look,
I rated his loss.
Yeah, well, he was done for using performance enhancing drugs, so there's no way around it. But like he gave you so much in attack, and it was weird because we were all watching it and saying, man, he looked like his career was finished. What's going on? And remember, his hair turned grey really quickly. That was also strange, but now we know why, I guess. But like when you lost him, it was just one more attacking weapon that was out of the side. And I think that the team overall improved, but just that loss of having him in the side, it really hurt the attack in some way, that by the end of like last season, the attack just was pretty pedestrian. And I just think that that's one of those underrated losses. Sometimes you look at a team and you say, oh, where did things go a little bit wrong for them? Because, like, there's a lot of very good teams that haven't won premierships. And I just think that, yeah, I know. I'm sorry for saying that to a Parramatta fan. I should be more responsible. But yeah, it's I think that was an underrated one. So it's good that you now have, a young bloke that's come into the side and just gives you a little bit of something there and attack out wide, because it is something you've missed. And look, Wonga Blake, he's a great player 3 or 4 times a year, but the rest of the time you're just waiting for him to be a great player, and it can be really frustrating.
I think the second half of this year has been Wonga's probably most consistent.
Yeah,
he has taken on a lot of grunt work through the middle. He takes a big charge on tackle 2 or 3, gets in the dummy half when we need him to. I'd like him to stop stepping infield. That would be great. Mm-hmm. But in terms of, he just adds some punch, and that's what we're missing when Jenko left or was suspended and now deregistered. But it was that punch that he'd bring on tackle 2 or 3 to help our sets get rolling. And you see that now with Wonga Blake and Will Penasini. They seem to have got a good 1-2 punch going. One goes, the other goes. And then, Will just adds that bit of extra finesse and a bit of extra power on the edge as well. And, it's that, it's a little bit of a cherry on top in terms of, Tom Upachek's not a bad player. He played very well for us for a good chunk of the season, but he doesn't create a lot, Tom.
Yeah.
Whereas Will, you've seen it already. He creates space. He puts the defense in 2 minds. He's a threat when he's got the ball. And in defense, he's been very physical. And he shut down Bradman Best, and a couple of weeks ago he shut down Justin Holm. And just, I know Best hasn't been best this year, but Justin Holm is one of the premier centers in the game, and he was virtually a non-factor against us. Due to Will Penasini's physicality in defence.
It's so exciting when you've got a young bloke who you see them come in, they get a few games and you're like, I wonder, I don't know about this young bloke. And then just something clicks and it's like, ooh, we might have something here. That's one of my favourite things about rugby league is when you see a young bloke, they go from being just named in the footy team to taking hold of their career and just showing you what they can do.
It's now Will's spot to lose, basically.
Yeah.
And he's got that. It's confidence, but it's not arrogance. He's confident in his ability.
Mm-hmm.
He knows he's got to keep doing the work though, and that's kind of the sweet spot you like to see a young player in. Like he knows it's his position now, and he's still got the confidence to keep showing it's his position, right? You see some players, they kind of get into the team, they get settled, they take the foot off the gas a little bit, or they panic a little bit thinking they've got to try and hold on to their spot and they try a little too hard. Whereas at the moment, without putting too much pressure on him, he seems to have kind of found his spot in the side, and he's settled there. And I mentioned him earlier with Isaiah Papali'i. A lot of people wanted him starting on the edge.
Mm-hmm.
I completely disagree with that. Who knows? We might see Brad playing some Ducks and Drakes this week and taking Sean Lane out of the starting side and putting Papa in on the left edge. But he came to us as our bench middle forward. That was the role we wanted him to play. And I think, when Junior comes off and Reg comes off, we need that type of player to come on and keep the intensity going, particularly with carrying the ball forward. You got guys who'll get in there and do the defensive work, and Papali'i does that. But he topped our meters on the weekend off the bench.
Yeah, it didn't hurt him. It didn't hurt his impact.
No, he ran for 194 meters, and 71 of those are post contact. And meters aren't everything, but you can't ask any more from your bench forward to do that. Junior and Reg laid that really good platform. Regan Campbell-Gillard was outstanding.
It was his best game.
He's out for 3
I've seen him play.
Yeah, he's out for 3 weeks. He played some amazing ones last year. I think one game he played 80 minutes straight. But defensively, that was his best game, and he was imposing. And I remember Gus Gould 2 years ago saying no one in Parramatta's pack scared him, and I think Regan Campbell-Gillard scares players. Like, they don't want to run at him. He came up and sat down Tyson Frizzell, and very few players sit down Tyson Frizzell.
Put him on his ass. It was such a good hit. That's the thing about Regan Campbell-Gillard. And he used to play for Penrith, and he was one of those players that, his career would sort of cruise along, but then you'd see games like he played on the weekend, and you're like, if he did that all the time, he'd be considered one of the top front rowers in the game. But there's too many times where he goes on cruise control. And, if the Parramatta Eels play like that, where they just are going to blast the opposition, they're going to be really, really hard for anybody to beat. It doesn't matter who they're playing against. And that's what makes this weekend's game really interesting. Now, did you watch the Panthers match at all?
I watch all the footy. All the footy. Give me all the footy. I'm happy to watch all the footy.
I see you're a fellow addict.
Yes, I'm an addict. I need help, as my wife. Occasionally I get, why are you watching this game? It's like, well, it's football. It's on. I'm watching it. Got to watch something. But just before we get on to that,
yes,
this week's game, and this kind of feeds into it, I think Brad Arthur resting pretty much the first grade side for round 25 is very much justified now when you see how they played physically against Newcastle.
Yeah, you can't argue.
They needed the physical, but I think they also needed the mental break. It is very hard because don't forget, their last 8 weeks of the season were ridiculous. They played the Roosters, they played Manly, they played Canberra, who were desperate for a final spot. They played Melbourne. They were going to have to play Penrith. And then you had the Cowboys, who put up a fight against us, and I think the Titans are in there as well, who I think switched off at one point in the second half. But they had a very tough run into the finals, and I think it was almost like a mentally, okay, you take this week off, you reset, and then you've got finals, so switch on for that. And then when you saw them playing against Newcastle, because some teams take that week off and they're a bit not all there, and apart from the kickoff, they seemed physically like, okay, let's go. It's finals time. We're ready to go. And, I think had they tried to do that playing the week before, I don't know if they would have been able to get up for it again,
Yeah, because, and look, we talked about it in our last podcast we did together, and I was really critical about, I thought it was a bad idea. But at the end of the day, they come out, they played really good. As you say, they looked physically in it, and they got the win. You can't argue against it if they get the win.
Well, Brad was, during the season, particularly during our slump or just before it, he said that he was looking for us to peak at the right time of the season, that he'd learnt the past couple of years. He's kind of tried to keep the same 17 throughout the season, right? And in the NRL, you can't really do that. It's such a physical game. Players need a rest, and he's done it throughout the year. I know Junior Paulo's had limited minutes some games. Regan Campbell-Gillard's had limited minutes. He's taken players off and out of the side when he's had to. And he's really limited the impact of some guys to make sure that they're fresh for the back end of the season. And I mean, obviously Regan's injury wasn't part of that plan, but he was so physically fresh to do what he did on the weekend. He only played 40 minutes, but they were 40 very impactful minutes. And again, like I said to you, you can't accuse Brad of not trying. He's rested his entire side to try and get them up for the finals. And I mean, Bennett did that. Bellamy did that. You got the two most successful coaches in the 21st century, basically, or the past 30 years doing that. I thought he'd done the right thing, and then when I saw them play on the weekend, they could have been a lot more polished, and they did some really dumb things like that charge down from Will Smith. I wanted to throw the remote through the TV because it was the dumbest thing he could have done then. I love Will, and I've always wanted him in the side. And again, he showed why he's got a lot of value. He comes on, plays dummy half, plays that roving lock, can fill in the back line if there's an injury. But I went, mate, you don't need to charge the ball down. Just put him under some pressure. Yeah. We're going to have a short field. We're going to have another chance to have a crack at their line. Instead, they got the ball back. They got a 6 again. They scored off the back of that. They were back in the game. It's just like in finals, you got to get that stuff right.
Yeah, and it's such a fine line. Like, it's charge downs are really weird because when they work, it can just end a game almost. It's so just devastating to you going for kicking for field position. All of a sudden they're scoring behind you. Yeah. But if you get that ball back, it's like, thank God, 6 again.
I kind of feel like if you're behind, the charge down is more on because you're trying to turn the game. Or if you're trying to prevent a field goal, of course, go and charge it down. But if you're ahead and you've got control of the game, there is no need for you to come up and charge the ball down. You're not under any pressure, right? And I think that's where some of our guys have got to think a little bit more. I get it, your adrenaline's going. Your job's to pressure the kicker, and you're going to get to him. You're going to get to him. But in saying that, you've got to kind of know deep down that charging the ball down, it doesn't necessarily help your team because you don't know where the ball's going to go. Yeah, it could pop up for a try, or it could happen what happened to Parramatta, and the other team recovers and they get 6 again on the halfway line after you've done all that defensive work to pin them in their own half. Yeah,
it's an interesting one. It's I love them parts of the game though where there's no answer. It's just it's more like philosophical differences between players and coaches and fans and stuff. And it's like, Wayne Bennett, when like over the last, say, 15 years, anytime you get a penalty near the sticks, you take the 2, it doesn't matter what's going on. And it's just those philosophical differences where it's hard to know. There's no black and white to it. It's just a feeling that certain people have about, like, I don't have any problems with a player going after a charge down. The only problem you have these days is it's risky in terms of it's very easy to get a penalty because you didn't attack the kicking player properly. Like,
if you make any contact with the kicker when you're doing that, you're asking for a penalty.
Yeah, and with everyone's moving quickly and stuff like that, it's so easy to just get in the wrong position, and even if you clip a player and it looks like you're just trying to attack their legs, it's just difficult. But anyway, so the Panthers against the South Sydney Rabbitohs, I think it's the worst I've seen the Panthers play all season. I didn't think South played that well to beat them, but they still got the win, so it doesn't matter. What were your thoughts watching the Panthers, knowing that you were going to have to play the winner of or the loser of that game?
I was kind of happy South's won because South bundled us out last year in the second week of the finals, and they've towed us up twice this season too. Admittedly, Latrell Mitchell was in their side this season for those 2 games. Funnily enough, I actually went, hey, I've seen this Penrith before. They played last week because Penrith looked very similar to that in the first half against Parramatta's reserve grade side.
Yeah.
They seemed unsettled by the physicality of the Parramatta side in round 25. They were down their own end. I think at one point Parramatta had 4 repeat sets. And I think, if it's an actual NRL side, there's probably a couple of tries there on offer because Penrith really weren't getting off their line well enough to close things down. and they weren't putting a lot of pressure on Will Smith, who was pretty much running that side, even though the one try Parramatta did score came off Jacob Arthur. But, they're playing a reserve grade side, and after 55 minutes, they ran out of gas. I think it wouldn't surprise me if Bennett looked at that game and kind of went, he would have had his plan probably written down already, but he's gone, well, that reinforces what we're going to do, and we're going to play Penrith down the middle. We're going to go hard at James Fisher-Harris. Now, a lot of people talked about Nathan Cleary not being in the game and then trying too much at the end. And I don't think, the halfback's always the one to cop the blame when a side loses. Same with Mitch, and kind of Cody Walker cops it for South. They don't really put the blame on Adam Reynolds, they'll put the blame on Cody Walker. But in that game, James Fisher-Harris, I think, was limited to 79 metres. He's your starting prop, he's your forwards leader. And they went after him. Like, they went, well, if we keep him busy, and he doesn't make many meters, they don't have their go forward. And, a lot of teams have the forward they like to play off. Look at the Cowboys. They pretty much play everything off Taumalolo. Yeah. Right? If he has a good charge, they're good to go. Souths on Friday. Oh, sorry, I think it was Saturday. Or was it Friday?
Saturday.
They played a lot of Tom Burgess, even though he came off the bench. And Mark Nichols does that job for them as well. Souths also went after To'o. They
did. They were smashing him.
So he ran for 196 meters, which sounds great, but his average is 247.
Yeah.
It was the fewest post-contact meters he's made all year, the second fewest tackle breaks, and it was only the third time he was held under 200 meters this season. So South's new, because in many respects, it's very much like a Semi Radradra effect. For us, when Semi was there 2017 and made top 4, he goes the following year. We lose all the momentum out of the backfield, right? Mm-hmm. We didn't have a way to start our sets or keep our sets going, right? There was no big blockbuster run. Yeah. There was no one to take that carry that goes 10, 15 meters, skittles defenders, and gives a way for us to play in the ruck because, you take out Fisher-Harris, you take out To'o, you take away Api Coruscant's ability to run the ball, right, which is one of his big strengths. He likes getting out of dummy half. He likes searching for the markers. He likes attracting the A defender to try and stick one of your big guys in or use Isaac Yeo to try and arrow in behind the ruck. And Yeo's very good at that, right? He did it against South. He kind of cut them up a couple times through the middle.
Yeah.
I think Souths, they knew finals football in that game. I was watching Matty Johns and Cooper Cronk talking about it. And it's like they went into that match going, it's probably going to be messy, it's going to be physical, and we're going to win those battles. Mm-hmm. And they never took their foot off the gas when it came to being physical. And it really seemed to unsettle Penrith. And in finals football, all that matters is winning.
Yeah, and there's because the Panthers are so young, and there is a feeling of inevitability about them in a certain way. And I don't say that arrogantly. Actually, I do, but no, because they're so young, that, they're all signed basically for a few years, that they're going to have a number of goes at it together. But I think what the weekend probably taught them is that none of that matters. Like, unless you get the job done, no one cares about potential. No one cares about your future. And I think that it was a good lesson. Like, that's one of the things about this Panthers team. As a Panthers fan, I kind of like seeing them learn their lessons. And I think that the week before against the Parramatta Eels team that had so many players out, like, there were lessons to be learned there as well, that, like, this is half a team you're basically playing. But if you don't turn up, they're still going to be able to put points on you. And that's one of the things that I think, I hope that they got out of this Souths game, because, as I said, I don't think Souths played that well, but they did what they needed to get the win. And Penrith, I just think that I really worry about their attack at the moment, and a lot of it I think is, I'm not so much worried about their forwards, because they've got 100,000 forwards they roll out there. It's kind of ridiculous. But when Api Coruscant is very, very quiet and then you don't know what you're getting out of Kickout from game to game. Like sometimes he's a world beater, other times he looks like he's never played football before. And then, Dylan Edwards, he wasn't in the team last week, but, he can be hot and cold. And, then all of a sudden you're just looking for Cleary to do something, and he's carrying a shoulder injury. And, he can't beat teams on it. Now, there's very few halfbacks in history can beat a team on their own. It's really only Andrew Johns and Jonathan Thurston sometimes. But, I think that it's all a lesson for this Panthers team. And I don't know how I feel about where they're at the moment, because going into the finals, I felt like it was maybe all lining up for them pretty well. They were getting their players back and things like that. And now I kind of worry that they're a little bit rattled. And because they're a young team, you don't know how they're going to react to that. Are they going to go into their shell, or are they going to go after it? And I think that's what's so great about this game, is that you've got a Parramatta side who's been there or thereabouts for so many years. And, they're only a few more wins away from being in the grand final. You got this Panthers team who, if you talked to them a month ago, they were probably all saying, yeah, we're looking at the Storm for the grand final. Now they're looking at the Storm in the semi-final best case scenario, and they're coming up against a Parramatta team who half their side went pretty well against them a couple of weeks ago. And so there's so many different things working, against each other, and it's really interesting. So coming into this podcast, I said we'd both talk about why our teams would win and why they would not win. Let's both do our why our teams will not win first. So do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Yeah, no, I'll go first, right?
Okay.
So I think if Parramatta doesn't win, it's because they play too sideways too early, right? Mm-hmm. They've done that a fair few times this season, and I don't know what it is, but it gets into their head that they've got to try and win the game, or someone's got to try and win the game for them.
Yeah.
And I think it's they feel like they can't beat Penrith down the middle. And so I think if Parramatta lose, it's because they go sideways too early. I don't think there's any like one particular player who is necessarily going to blow up for us. I might swear at Sean Lane a couple of times during the game, but that seems par for the course for every Parramatta fan. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be one particular player or one particular scenario. I think it would be, a gradual kind of implosion over 80 minutes, I think is what happens when we lose. The other thing is that I'm worried about is if we have any sort of start like we did against Newcastle. If we botch the kickoff, whether we're receiving or kicking off, and if we concede an early try, sometimes we can go into our shell. And knowing this Penrith side, they're not going to be like Newcastle, where they're like a little bit surprised they're in the lead. They're very comfortable front runners. So I think if we lose, it's probably off a really poor start, and then things just devolve from there.
So I think if Penrith lose, it will be that the Eels got a little bit of a start, not even a big one, just a little bit of a start, good start, and that our attack we don't really get much from Coruscant. If they shut Coruscant down, I think that will be a huge, huge thing for the Eels. And just maybe getting to the point almost like last week, where they almost got to the 60th minute and they're like, hang on, this is not really going our way like we thought, and just not being able to pull it out of the fire. I also think you could get someone like a Junior Paulo, who he adds something different to a lot of forwards in the game, where he can do the stock standard forward sort of play. And it's one of the reasons I love him. He can just get you go forward and be good in defence, but he's also got that ability to put on a bit of footwork and get a nice pass away and things like that. And so it's someone like him has the ability to make the game go wrong for an opposition. And I wonder how Penrith would react if things start going wrong for them, because we've really only seen that happen to them a few times. And like last year's grand final, they start the grand final and basically give away 10 points through penalties. Things go wrong for them. and they don't react very well until about the 70th minute, where they started to pull themselves back together. I wonder how that would happen for such a young side. And, their attack has looked very clunky over the last number of weeks. I've kind of thought that they just needed game time together again. But now we're starting to get to a point where I think that if they don't click in this game in attack, it's more than just needing game time together. So that's the thing that worries me, is that they'll basically be bogged down in their attack. And, Parramatta do have strike players who can make things go wrong for you. And I worry about Penrith's ability to deal with when things go wrong in the big games.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I was thinking about with Penrith, and this probably feeds into why I think if Parramatta wins, it's actually their experience at this stage of the season. Right? Mm-hmm. They played sudden death football in 2017, 2019, 2020, and they've been knocked out each time. Some with really poor games, like Melbourne did to us in 2019, and the Cowboys in 2017. And others like last year, we actually led, and then it's like we dropped our bundle. Yeah, a little bit inexperienced and weren't quite with it, and we had a lot of backline changes and none of that. So Fergo was out, who's our most experienced finals player. Jenko obviously suspended the day of the game, debutant on the wing. This time, the only bloke I think who's making his finals debut in week 2, I think is Will Penasini. Mm-hmm. And you've got a premiership winner on the bench in Ryan Madison, and you've got a premiership winner in Fergo in the back line. So you've got a lot of that experience. And I almost think it's Parramatta's getting to a stage where it's like, if not now, when, in terms of getting to the third week of the semis. Mm-hmm. They know what this football's about. And the thing that's giving me a lot of confidence is that we've beaten Melbourne twice this year. Yeah. And I think if you were to bottle those two performances and unleash them this week, it'd be very hard for Penrith to beat them, because in those two games they've beaten Melbourne at their own game. Yeah. The funny thing is, I heard Matty John saying he thinks Parramatta's a daytime team and they're playing nighttime, so Penrith might be an advantage. I'm like, mate, we beat Melbourne in the torrential rain in round 2. Then we beat them after they'd won 19 games in a row at night. We are a nighttime team. Like, we played the vast majority of our games at night because we're always on TV. I think we play like 4 games a year in the sunshine, and yeah, that helps ball movement. But I feel like we're at this stage of the season now where it shouldn't matter what time you play. Yeah. You're in the finals. If we play Melbourne, we're going to play them at 4:00 in the afternoon in the preliminary final because they had moved the start time. Mm-hmm. Right. This week we're going to play at whatever it's 8:00 at night on the Saturday. That's not going to matter. But I really think if Parramatta just looks at what they did to beat Melbourne and held that 20-minute period against Newcastle, go, that's the blueprint, and go into the game playing like that, I think that's where they win the game. And I was looking at the team, and I actually went, they've done something very similar to what Souths did last week in terms of the team they're rolling out. Mm-hmm. So they're rolling out the 2 big boys to start with, which is Reg and Junior. But if you look at South's bench, they had Benji Marshall on there, they had Jacob Host, they had Jai Arrow, and they had Tom Burgess. Benji's a utility, and Will Smith plays that utility role. Mm-hmm. Right? You got Isaiah Papali'i, who's your bona fide middle dominant forward, which is what Tom Burgess does for Souths. But then you had Arrow and Host, who kind of come on and play their roles. And Arrow kind of plays in the middle, but he can also play on edge. And Parramatta's rolling with Bryce Cartwright and Ryan Madison. Mm-hmm. And I actually see, whilst Will Smith will do his job at hooker when he comes on, and Papali'i will do his job in the middle, Cartwright and Madison have something different to them. They're not just hard runners of the ball, even though Cartwright, surprisingly, this season has ran the ball hard. He's looked for that contact. He's looked to push through defenders, but they have the ability to ball play before the line, ball play in the line. Both of them have a nice little short kicking game. They have that ability to come on, and if the game's tight, to open it up, right, and make it difficult for Penrith's defensive structure. So Penrith's the best defensive team in the competition, but even the best defensive team in the competition, they hate defending offloads. They hate defending second phase play, and they don't like getting compressed. And Parramatta did that to Melbourne. They forced the Melbourne middles to compress continuously. And in that Melbourne game a few weeks ago, all 4 of Parramatta's tries were scored on the edge, I'm pretty sure. So what they did is they compressed Melbourne's middle, and then they basically had, either Melbourne short on a side or it was one-on-one matchups and forced the defenders to make a decision, which generally doesn't go well for the defender. Once the defender has to make a decision from multiple options, they generally choose the wrong one because the playmaker's dictating to them. So I think if Parramatta does win this weekend, they'll play that very direct, very aggressive. They'll go after To'o. They'll go after James Fisher-Harris. They'll literally try and belt Penrith into submission. And it's also why I like the fact Ray Stone's in at hooker.
Yeah.
I love him. I see a bit of Brandon Smith in him in terms of Smith's more of a natural hooker than Ray is.
Yeah.
But that tenacity in defense, that physicality, and just this willingness to work yourself till you physically can't work anymore. And I remember seeing him a couple of years ago and going, this is a terrible comparison to make for him. But there's also a little bit of that Ray Price in him in terms of he will get in there and he will do that really hard stuff. And he's got no frills about it. He's going to look at a guy that's a lot bigger than him and go, I'm going to cut you in half. And he does that. And he picked up and dumped Clemmer a couple of times. He picked up the Saifidi brothers and drove them backwards. And he played in that round 25 game against Penrith as well. Yeah. And he was immense. He made 55 tackles that game, and he took on that Penrith pack almost single-handedly. And Makatoa was good alongside him. But it was Ray Stone leading the line and absolutely whacking blokes. And he's been like that ever since I've seen him play, since the 20s. Just flies out of line, hits anything that moves. And I think he can actually be a big part of those opening exchanges, in that, like I said earlier, as most teams they don't like it when a team's physical from the get-go. They don't like that team that looks to actively belt you, not just hit you hard, but like physically pick you up, drive you backwards, and make that statement early. So I think if Parramatta win, they'll do that early on, and then everything else will come off the back of that.
Yeah, I would agree. And like I've always felt like whenever you're playing against a team who their defensive system is very consistent, that's the way you beat them, is you just rattle them. You make the game go wrong for them. And I think that's the way that remember there was a little bit of a time where the Storm had real problems with the New Zealand Warriors. Because the Warriors would have little offloads and things like that. And they weren't doing what the Storm wanted them to do. And like another time that I think we saw it was weirdly the 2003 season with the Roosters, and the Panthers had the wood on the Roosters because the Roosters had come out and try and absolutely belt every team off the park. And the Panthers had just fucking run at them just as hard. They didn't care. It was really strange.
You had Morley and what was it, Nullavow and Pulatuas, and you had that was Joel Clinton. Was he? Yeah, he was leading the line with Martin Lang
and Ben Ross off the bench, and it was just, and it's funny because it was this weird little moment for the Panthers. A year and a half later, it was kind of all over for that team. But when you've got teams that are really good defensively and they've got their systems and stuff, you start making things go wrong for that team, and they can fall apart really quickly. It's kind of interesting. And I think that's the two weaknesses for the Storm and the Panthers. And one of the few teams that have shown that they can do that to a team is Parramatta, where they've done it against the Storm, There
was only a point as well between the two kind of full strength sides earlier in the season. I know Marnie was out and Cleary was out. But there was a missed penalty goal in that game. That was the difference. I think a lot of people have overlooked that, particularly looking at the betting odds.
Yeah. Oh, the betting odds are unbelievable. Like if you're into betting, put all your money on Parramatta, even if you're a Panthers fan, because this honest to God, like 2 weeks ago, I would have said, man, if we end up playing the Parramatta Eels in the finals, I'm pretty confident. Now I'm like, this is 50-50. This is a flat out 50-50.
Yeah, I'm 100% on that. I also think round 25 could play into it a little bit. As I said, they rotated the team, but there's got to be some confidence in that Parramatta side that they matched it with the second place side for 55 minutes with a bunch of blokes who mostly of them hadn't played for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And the guys that had limited minutes, and then they went and at one point I think it was 6-all, right? And if you'd assume some of that confidence goes through the side, going, well, if they can do it, well, we've got to be a lot better at that than our second stringers.
The thing about the Panthers that I think can be a difference, and look, I don't think it's going to happen, weirdly enough, but I think the Panthers, if they can, because they have been like not at their best, and it's been a number of weeks now, maybe even a number of months, if you go back to when they didn't have Cleary for a while. If it just clicks for them, they're going to be bloody hard for anybody to beat because their defense is so good. And they're maybe the only team in the competition that when they're on defensively, it doesn't matter who's playing. They'll just strangle you to death. And we've seen them do that to so many teams that aren't as good as Parramatta, but they can just shut you down and there's nothing you can do. It's kind of crazy how good their defense is. If it clicks for them in any game against anyone, it's going to be really hard for them to beat. And I guess that's the worry as a Parramatta fan, that you're watching this Panthers team who looks beatable at the moment, but then when the game starts, it's like, oh, man, it clicked for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I'm a bit worried that, To'o will have a really big breakout game to bounce back from next week. I think that's probably the major danger I see, because as I said earlier, so much comes off the back of him. If he's really on, he runs for 300 meters. Good luck. Stopping Penrith. I think it's also going to be a good battle between Mitch and Nathan. Both played Origin this year. And unfortunately, Mitch had to carry a broken back and Jack Whiten in the side.
Which is worse.
which is worse, exactly, right? Jack Whiten booting the ball dead 4 times, or your broken spine. But between them, they've got 2 of the most effective kicking games in the competition. So you've got Mitch, Nathan, and obviously Adam Reynolds. Adam Reynolds is against Penrith. That's probably what really killed Penrith, right? Is just the accuracy of Adam Reynolds and his ability to just dictate terms to teams. But both Mitch and Nathan have massive boots, and so much of their team relies on their kicking game. I thought it was a bit odd from Cleary to be constantly bombing to Blake Tafe. I think that's how you say his name. Rabs had about 6 attempts at it, so I've got no confidence in my ability to say it. But he dropped the first one, but he caught the next dozen. Yeah. At what point do you go, maybe not him, maybe not kick to the fullback on the full with no pressure on him and let him return the ball?
Yeah.
That for me was one of the major surprises, that Cleary's kicking game never seemed to really look on. And despite all of the discussion in the media from Bennett and Ivan Cleary about pressure on the kickers and blockers and all that crap, I don't think it played that much in the game itself. No. I don't think we had too many issues with the blockers, and I don't think we had too many issues apart from that one crappy penalty on Keon Kalon-Matangi, who literally could not have arrived any better.
That was ridiculous, that penalty.
I think if you freeze frame it, the ball might have still been on Cleary's boot.
Yeah. I could not believe. I thought that game just generally was really poorly officiated.
Oh, yeah.
But that was the worst of the penalties in that game. Sometimes you worry. I think that we've got people running the game that are so worried about the game at times, and that feeds through to the referees, because obviously these people are the referees' bosses. And I think that's part of it, because there was not a penalty there, not even close.
No, that very much to me looked like the discussion in the week got to the referees there, because there was nothing late. There was nothing dangerous about that tackle. He wrapped his arms. He took him to the ground. You just go, that's a fair hit. Nothing dangerous occurred there. But I also think Ivan Cleary is really just got to stay away from Wayne Bennett. You don't take on the master of mind games and think you're going to win.
Yeah, look, I haven't followed any of it in the media this week at all, not a shred of it. And I've only seen it pop up from, people retweeting the articles every so often into my timeline. So I know that there's been a little bit of back and forth, but I don't know why. I don't know why the coaches do it. And this is why they don't like talking to the media, because anything they say gets blown up into something huge.
Bennett does it deliberately. He knows what he's doing. Like he went up and he did that to take the pressure off Souths because otherwise all the talk would have been about the missing Latrell Mitchell. And there basically wasn't a single article last week about Latrell. It was all about Penrith used blockers. Souths hit Cleary, right? That's all it was. And you just got Bennett's probably just sitting there going, well, that had the exact effect I hoped it would. It distracted the media from, an actual problem we've got in that we had a bloke who's the halfback playing fullback for us, and at the same time distracted the opposition coach for us. So he was answering media questions about, do you think they hit Nathan Lade? What about your blockers? And et cetera, et cetera. And I think, have done it for forever. Jack Gibson did it. Phil Gould did it. Bob.
Whoop, are you there? Are you there, mate?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Sorry, it just cut out for a second. I heard you say Bob Fulton did it.
Yeah, Bob Fulton and Trent Robinson does it, right? And 2 weeks ago, he was going to light the bunker on fire. And this week, when Verrills rearranges someone's face, he's got nothing to say about it. Right? Yeah. So it's all about a little bit of that pressure you can put on the referees. I'm surprised. Brad Arthur's never done it. I thought he might have.
Okay, here's a question for you, and we'll both do this. What is your toss up to the media this week about the Panthers?
In what respect?
A media like what Bennett does, where he tosses something up and he lets the media talk about it, and it takes all the pressure off his team.
So if I was in Brad Arthur's shoes and I wanted to play Wayne Bennett games,
yes.
I'd probably just do the same thing. I'd go at his blockers.
Really?
It worked. It worked, and me knowing the media, that they would just crank that back out again. The next thing would be like Brad Arthur engages in Master Coach mind games. That would be the headline in the Daily Telegraph the next day.
Mine would be, I would probably target Gutho. It'd be something along the lines of, I don't think his teammates like him. And that's it. Just walk away. Just based on nothing.
Give me a sec. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I might have just had like one of those little blips because I've got a document saying trying to connect.
Okay, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
I can edit it out. It's okay.
Yeah. So what I was saying is I probably wouldn't go after Mitch with something like that. Because he seems to be the type of player that would gladly get sledged and then show you how good he is. He seems to be the type of player who can do that, and he's kind of done that a bit this year. A lot of people said he didn't show up in big games.
Yeah.
Flat track bully, didn't do too much, against good sides, and he kicked Melbourne to death. He guided us around last week, and it was basically the difference. I mean, his goal kicking and his general play kicking plus the try he scored, won us really, really got us in the position to win that game.
Yeah.
Definitely go after Guthers, and he seems like the type of guy who'd have a problem with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just feel like, especially when you look back at because I think that somebody said to Gutherson about a month and a half ago, dude, you can't yell at your teammates. You're gonna piss everyone off. Because I think he's been more chilled the last few weeks.
Yeah, that was the offside penalty against, I think, Tom Opacek or something. And I kind of get it. Clint's a very, very competitive guy. But yeah, I think he might have eased up a little bit. And I mean, part of it also might be because we're winning, right? When you're winning, the frustration doesn't come into it.
100%.
We've won our past 3 games with our full side on the field: Cowboys, Melbourne, and Newcastle. I mean, it's not like he could blow up on anyone in the Newcastle game. He's the one who kicked the ball out in the full.
Yeah.
You've kind of lost all rights then to sledge anyone.
Oh, shit. Look, Andrew Johns blew up at his teammates more than anyone. Doesn't matter when you're the best player.
First did it as well.
Yeah. So score prediction. What do you think will be the score line Is it going to be a high scoring game? Is it going to be a low scoring game? What do you reckon?
A lot of people have said they're expecting points. I'm not. I think both these sides are going to try and base their game on defense and winning that battle first. It's not going to be a shootout, I don't reckon. I reckon that I hate tipping Parramatta because they've broken my heart so many times. But I'm going to tip them 18-14. And it's going to come down to the last 10 minutes. It's not going to be one of those. They get out to that 18. Oh dear God! If they get out to an 18-6 lead, I'm dead. Just 12 points. Nah.
Look, I tend to agree with you. I think it's going to be a defensive. The thing that's going to win it's defense, and I don't think we're going to see anybody score on 30 points unless something goes dramatically wrong. I think it's going to be less than a try between them by the end. Obviously, I think Penrith's going to win, but I could see it being like, I don't know, 16 points to 12 or something like that. Like, I think it's going to be a real grind of a game. And it's, I just can't wait. It's one of those games. I really do. I feel like this is the first of the finals games where I'm like, I think this is completely 50-50. I've got no idea who's going to win. The winner gets to take on the Storm, which is wonderful. But at the same time, I think that the winner of the grand final is going to come from this side of the draw. So, and if you look, you've got to beat Melbourne eventually. Why not do it in the semi-finals? So, man, it's going to be such a cool contest, and it's cool that it's the two Western Sydney powerhouses going head to head. I don't know. Like, do you ever get into the thing of people saying, they hate each other's guts? Like, I've never got that.
I had that discussion earlier in this week, actually, because people are like, it's the Battle of the West. I'm like, growing up in a Parramatta household, and Pa was following the Eels from the 50s, Penrith was never a big game for us. The big games were Manly, the Bulldogs, and St. George. Yeah. Right. And part of the day he's died, hardly ever called them St. George Illawarra. That was St. George. Yeah. Right. And his thing was, Manly, you had the 70s. They beat us in our first grand final. They knocked us out in the semis in 75 the year before. Then we beat them in 82 and 83. So you had a rivalry there. The same thing with the Bulldogs. You had Parramatta won 4 premierships and the Bulldogs won 4 premierships in the 80s. And they were the 2 premier sides. And then you had the Super League War. And we got pretty much their 4 best players from them. And that sparked it again. Right? And then you get to 2009, we play each other in the preliminary final. So you got those big games in there. And St. George, it's the 77 grand finals, the drawn grand final, and then the replay. And then we go and recruit Steve Edge from them, one of their former captains, a premiership winner, multiple premiership winner, and he captains us to three premierships and 4 grand finals. So you had that, you had that rivalry with each other. And for Penrith and Parramatta, it's based around locality and the fact that Panthers came around 20 years after Parramatta did. And that's all it's really based on. Yeah. If I asked you to tell me a legendary match between the two, you probably couldn't.
No, there's no, like, this is probably one of the biggest games between the two teams.
I think it's only the second time they're playing each other in the finals.
Yeah.
And for me, a great game was a game in 2010 when we came back from 20-0 down. But that was mid-season, right? There wasn't a lot on there. There wasn't a huge amount of pressure on it. No. All those other teams that we've played, there has been something on the line for us. Yeah. And we've either won or lost, but the rivalry's been born there. And for me, I've never really held any animosity towards Penrith.
Yeah.
All the animosity for me seems to come from Penrith, like Michael Jennings saying he hated Parramatta and Regan Campbell-Gillard saying it was drilled into us in the lower grades. And then you got Phil Gould who talks about it, and I'm kind of like, it seems very manufactured. And for a cross-sport reference, it seems very much like Everton, like trying to punch up at Liverpool a little bit. Yeah. Like these days, it's kind of like, it's still a rivalry, and Liverpool's like, we're going to beat you, and then we're going to go win trophies, and you're going to sit there and be ignored, which is kind of what that Merseyside derby had turned into in the last 20 years. There's not quite that stage in the Parramatta Penrith because they're both two very good sides.
Yeah.
But that's what it's felt like. It's like felt like one time's tried to create the rivalry, but there's been nothing to spark it I mean, this could spark it. Right? If this comes down and it ends up in Golden Point, you've got a legendary game between these two clubs, and then you can probably say there's a rivalry there. In many respects, I think we've got a bigger rivalry with Melbourne.
Yeah. I would agree. I know I've been a Panthers supporter my entire life, and like there's never been anything against Parramatta. In fact, I've been really happy to see, because our teams, the other thing is our teams have never been good at the same time for the most part.
That's
and people don't realize, like, for the first like couple of decades of their existences, Parramatta and Penrith were abysmal. So that, like, it wasn't like there was anything that was built on them like trying to get anywhere. They were just both abysmal, and then Parramatta was good, and then Penrith was good for a bit, and then Parramatta was good for a bit, and then Penrith was good for a bit. Like, it's never lined up. This is as close as it's probably been ever.
Yeah. I mean, you've got legendary players that played against each other, you know, going back, you know, is it Greg Alexander and Peter Sterling and the like. But, you know, Parramatta was the dominant side when Brandy was around.
Yeah.
You know? So he got rep jerseys, but it wasn't like, you know, today where Cleary is the dominant half, and the guy that's snapping at his heels for the New South Wales jersey is Mitchell Moses.
Yeah.
As we saw when Cleary was injured, Mitchell was the one that was selected. But yeah, I agree. This is kind of the first time we've had two where both sides are really good sides, and they're getting to play in a high stakes game against each other. And like I said, the rivalry I feel with Melbourne is because of that 2009 grand final. Again, a very consequential game, and then the follow-up of the salary cap cheating.
Yeah.
And I remember that game. I unfortunately wasn't there because it was raining that day, and Dad kind of went, I don't know if I want to go watch Melbourne play. It's bucketing out there. We're going to sit in the rain. We could get beaten. And then we turned up, and it was like you had 2 all-in brawls. You had Fui coming off the back fence just trying to skittle Melbourne players, and it was you could hear it through the TV. There was like 10,000 fans there, and it felt like the entire stadium was there.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately Melbourne beat us in 2006, 2007, 2009, 2017, 2019, 2020. Right? They've beaten us in 7 consecutive final series. So that's one of the reasons I really want to beat Penrith.
Yeah.
Is not because I dislike Penrith. I actually respect what they've done over the past few years. It's so we can get Melbourne in another high stakes game and finally get one over them.
Yeah.
Because it's killing me.
Look, I'm the same. Like, if somebody said, that's why I actually would love the idea of playing them in the Melbourne in the semi-final, because I don't care when we play them. I just want to beat them, you know, because I think whoever, if it's Parramatta, Penrith or Melbourne go through from that semi, I think they win the grand final. But yeah, because I always have this thing of, and I've been able to, like, if you beat a team the last time out in the grand final, you own their soul. So the Raiders beat the Panthers in their first grand final, but the Panthers got that one back on them. And then we owned the Roosters soul from 2003. We've got to get it back on the Storm, you know, and it's not going to be right until that's sorted out. But why'd it have to be the Storm of all teams? I mean, bloody hell, couldn't it have been somebody that chokes or something? Why couldn't it have been the bloody Dragons or someone?
Well, I feel more confident if I was to be playing the Storm in the preliminary final than if I was to play them in the grand final.
Oh, so do I.
You know,
it's so funny.
It's kind
to
of
say
like
that.
It's kind of like Melbourne's. They feel more vulnerable in a preliminary final. And well, I mean, they've played more final series than grand finals, obviously, so they lose in finals games. But it'd just be the ability to go, we went one further than you. Like, to beat them and go to the grand final, I'd be devastated if we beat them and then lost the grand final. But at the same time, they're like, well, we beat Melbourne. You know, we beat Melbourne in a knockout match, and for once, it wasn't Melbourne beating us in the big game. You know? I mean, it could all very much end by the end of Saturday night, and then all this discussion is pointless.
Yeah, one of us is going to be really upset on Sunday morning, and we'll find out who it is. It's wouldn't it be funny though if it ended up being some like disgraceful final where like players are sent off, and it's like, remember when Mitchell Moses got his jaw broken and they broke Nathan Cleary's arm, and just like Just the
and it's
stuff.
just like they accidentally transported the 70s to 2021.
Yeah.
And you've got like Ray Stone pulling like a shiv out of his sock going after someone.
Why did Pinacini all of a sudden is throwing bloody elbows and shit? What the fuck? That would be so weird.
Why was Kick Out throwing another player into one other player?
Yeah. Bloody Kick Out picked up
Royal
Dylan
Rumble.
Brown, spear tackled him. What the fuck?
Yeah. And it's just Royal Rumble, and you've got Ashley Klein like cowering in the corner going, "Stop it, guys. Stop it. I'm going to blow the whistle really hard."
Oh, shit. It all just ends up in a forfeit because you get too many plays sent off from both sides.
I'm slightly worried about Ashley Klein refereeing in a big stakes game because he had the South Roosters game when Mitchell knocked out Manu and he lost complete control of that. And I'm like, this is a knockout elimination match. Klein couldn't keep control of a regular season game. If this thing heats up, and it could, you got Regan Campbell-Gillard who's not going to take a backward step, and James Fisher-Harris isn't either. If they get into each other and Klein doesn't assert his authority, it could very quickly devolve into a, we don't really have brawls these days, but a lot of, shirt grabbing and
nasty words,
and Jerome Luai yelling at someone.
Yeah. I'm not big on blaming referees for things because I'm big on like if you feel like the refereeing's bad, you've got to overcome bad refereeing to win a game. It's just part of it. But I am willing to say I think Ashley Klein's the worst of the NRL referees, and by a comfortable margin. There's
a running joke between my dad and I. We say he's refereeing in a different universe to the game everyone's watching. It's like he'll pick stuff up no one's noticed, and then miss really obvious stuff. And then with the Roosters Souths game, it is like all you had to do was send him off, and that was done. Right?
Yeah.
There would have been no more crap. There wouldn't have been anything else happen. You didn't send him off. You blamed the bunker for not sending him off, and then you lost control of the game.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my more fear is the refereeing could actually ruin what is promising to be a very good game. I'd rate Klein at the bottom of the ladder as well. And Matt Checken is retiring because they won't give him big games, and Ashley Klein's still getting them.
It's crazy. It's so crazy. It's well, let's just hope that we get a game where they don't pull a crack down out of their backsides and they don't try and make a statement with the officialdom and stuff, and we just see a bloody good game of football because everything has lined up. And it's funny because we talked about it 2 weeks ago where everything was kind of lining up really cool for this game, and it's going to be amazing. I just can't wait. And if you're a Panthers fan and a Parramatta fan and you're not excited for this game, I don't know what's wrong with you because biggest game in the history of these two clubs. I'm going to say it right now.
Oh, 100%. 100% the biggest game between these two clubs. And like I said, we might end up with a rivalry out of this, like a proper, rivalry rather than just because they're the two teams in the West. It's because they're two of the best teams in the competition and they're going at it. That's where rivalries start.
Yeah. Yeah. At the very least, give us a reason to hate each other.
Yeah, exactly. Give us a little bit of controversy, a little bit. Just something so that we can argue with each other for the next 12 months.
I mean, Gutho tried with his hairstyle, but then he cut his hair.
Yeah, I think Junior Paulo was the offending party in that. I think he was playing barber. And
oh, really? And he got rid of it?
Because Junior's got one, right? I'm not sure if he still got it. He might have cut his off, but he had one for a while, that rat's tail with the circle of hair at the back of his head. Not that anyone's going to tell Junior Paulo he looks stupid. No. But everyone can tell Clint. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but they've been the Eels boys have been printing T-shirts for each other each week for the captains.
Yes, right? I've seen it. Yeah.
So someone printed up Clint Guthers' haircut one week, a couple of weeks ago, and stuck that on the shirt for the boys to run around in.
Oh, shit. They were great. That was so good.
Yeah,
you could see they were so disappointed having to wear it too. It was so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. Just warning you, you're going to become a regular on here because it's always really good fun to talk to you. Tell us where we can find you online and tell us how we can subscribe to Rugby League Monthly.
Okay, so first of all, you can go to oneideal.com. That's all the Eels gear that you need. That's free. It's a supporter site, so you do need to sign up with the free account to post and comment. It's free to read stuff. But if you want to go to Rugby League Monthly, so you get rugbyleaguemonthly.com and /subscriptions. You can sign up there. I've got a free month at the moment, so if you sign up, your first month is free. Nice and easy. So I've got a mixture of free and paid content. So generally the longer pieces with the interviews or the feature articles cost, but the shorter stuff and the opinion stuff's free. And there's some quizzes there as well. So if you want to test your NRL knowledge, you can. So you can go to rugbyleaguemonthly.com /subscriptions. You sign up there and your first month is free. And after that, it's $5 dues a month. So if you do that, thank you very much. It keeps the site running, basically. I'm basically covering my costs at the moment. So that's awesome. But yeah, if you're an Eels fan and you're not on One Eel, jump on it, and they'll be going out and hammer and tong on the weekend.
Yeah, go there. It's I still can't remember if I'd signed up for it. I think it was maybe because I remember years and years ago I signed up for a bunch of different supporter club forums, and I can't remember if I signed up for the One Ideal one or not. But I just love how long it's been going. It's just it's so cool to be able to talk to somebody that's involved in one of the old school rugby league websites. Yeah, and Rugby League Monthly, you were telling me some of the stuff you're working on. I won't give it away, but it's unbelievable stuff you're working on.
I mean, the concussion series is pretty amount in the open with that. That's been going for the past 2 months. There's a third month coming out in October with the monthly edition there. And there's possibly going to be a fourth part to that. I'm tossing up if I need to write a fourth edition or if the third part of the concussion series will finish there. But yeah, so every month there's stuff coming out, and it's a bit of my interest, a bit of what's going on in rugby league as well. So you try to keep it a bit current. But the most recent ones, the September issue was out 2 weeks ago. If you wanted to know about what players do when they retire, there's a chat there with Ryan Morgan, the former Eels and Storm centre. He also did a 5 minutes with, so he gave me a bit of a rundown of like the pests in his side and the guys that were funny in the dressing room and why Fui was the worst teammate in the dressing room. And I also had a good chat with Christian Welch, to the Storm forward. You've probably seen him on Twitter. Very intelligent guy. I love talking to him. It was a great half an hour or so I had with him. He's very insightful in terms of where his career's come from, but also on the state of the game at the moment. And he's we'll have some more of his opinions on concussion actually next month. He's got some very, very good comments on that. So I kind of can't wait to put that out in a couple of weeks' time.
Brilliant. And support independent rugby league journalism, because it's the best rugby league content we have, and it's not even close. It's we'll always support independent rugby league content creators because they're now the very best there are in business. It's fantastic.
Yep. Excellent. Thanks so much, mate.
Thank you, Elliot, for coming on, and thank you for everyone for listening. Good luck to Panthers and Eels fans. It's going to be a great game, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Can I just get in? Go the Eels. This is the number one podcast for Eels supporters.
Yes, it is. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Bye-bye.